Yo, what's good? It's Mastermind MMA, and this video is my UFC 197 fight analysis and breakdown. Now, that is obviously, as you guys know, Jones versus OSP, and I got a lot to say about this fight. I watched it multiple times, twice. It's not multiple, but literally I just watched it again. And starting off, where should I start? Before I start anything, I'm going to preface this statement by saying, what the fuck was Daniel Cormier doing as a commentator? What was he doing there? It was annoying as shit to hear DC and his commentary. Because my objective opinion of it was DC was trying to be objective, but he wasn't being objective. He made comments like, since you guys asked me, there wouldn't be this much lull in the action if Jones was facing me. Lots of what ifs and whatnot. Straight up, why are you letting DC do commentary when he pulled out of a fight? He ruined the main event for you. Because it was supposed to be Jones versus DC, and then Jones could have had a quick turnaround, and it could have been Rumble Jones at UFC 200. But no, it was OSP on 3 weeks' notice. Now, my first thoughts on watching the fight, I'll get back into this later. My first thoughts on watching the fight was, at first I thought, is John rusty? Like, it didn't live up to John Jones' expectation. Not his own, but from what he's done in the octagon before, it wasn't on that caliber. Now, in the post-fight press conference, Jones said it was a change in opponent. And I didn't even take that into consideration. Now, you have to think, John Jones, he's been very vocal on not taking short notice fights. Very vocal about it. And there's an obvious reason for it. You know, it shows that part of John's greatness is within his preparation. Because when he prepares, when he has all the time in the world to study his opponent, it's he does the things that he usually does. He goes in there and he takes what they do best, apply it to himself, and use it against them. Now with OSP, he didn't have that time to do as much studying. So it was almost like Jones kind of just hopped into the fight in a sense. 3 weeks, obviously 3 weeks notice isn't enough to get acclimated to someone's tendencies and their style and their patterns that they do. And Jackson Wink, their specialty is game planning. So he didn't have enough time to game plan, and he had to play it by ear in the octagon. Now, if you saw my UFC pick for this fight, I did a whole pick on the card, except for the last two fights on the main card, but I did the top three, and I went 2 for 3 out of my picks. But that's nothing to brag about because they're fairly give me picks, you know. John Jones and Demetrius Johnson, like, obviously. So he came in, he was throwing mostly oblique kick. Not oblique kicks, because that's an incorrect name. That's what Rogan calls it. But he was throwing those hyperextending knee kicks. And that was his most success. And if you guys remember back to the Gustafsson fight, that Gustafsson was really kind of outboxing John, but John was out kickboxing Gustafsson. He was mostly throwing his kicks. Now I don't have the stats pulled up or anything, but from my memory, John was taking it to him by his kicks mostly. And I think with the taller guys, the kick kind of really backs them up and creates distance. So when he does that kick, if you notice, he does it and then either creates the distance, or as soon as he does it, he uses that to close the distance really quick. Now, I was nervous in this fight because especially when Owens hit John with that shot that knocked the snot from his nose. Because Owens is a powerful guy. Now, John Jones, back when I did my picks, I thought, I'm not sure if I said second or third round. I believe I said second. I said second round TKO. Because that's what I was expecting. Because I thought that, if you guys remember, at the end of the fourth round, John almost finished Owens. But I think, I thought that would happen earlier in the fight. Now, I don't think that it was ring rust, to be honest with you. Because I'm not doubting ring rust, but I feel when you're that caliber athlete that Jones is, that Dominic Cruz is, that you're kind of exempt from that. You know what I mean? Especially with John. If you really, really think about it, he fought Glover in April of 2014, then fought DC in January of 2015. So that's like not that long, like a 9-8 month gap. Now, I honestly don't think if you add 5-6 months to that within that break, that's that long of a time, if you get what I'm saying. Like, a year and like 4 months, that's, if it was Jones coming off of that year, he did 4 fights in a year, maybe. But the fact that it was like 2 fights in a year, like, but closer to the tail end of a year, I don't think that many months is going to make a difference. If I'm being honest, I think that layoff kind of helps John, because when it turns into a job, when it turns into it's just, I got to do this for money, I got to do this to pay my bills, or even just to stack some cash, you know, the passion and the action isn't that same. Now, Vince, he did a good job. I'll give it up to OSP. He did way better than I expected. But OSP wasn't pulling the trigger. It seemed like he was, like, the build up to the fight, he was downplaying the magnitude of it. And within the fight, it kind of seemed like his victory would be not getting finished. Granted, he had a broken arm within what round, I don't know, but I'm assuming he fought the tail end of the fight, like maybe the last 2 rounds or the last round, with a broken arm. But before that, he wasn't pulling the trigger at all. Jones, that's, you know, the knee extending kick, you know, he doesn't really need to get in, you know, he doesn't really need to adjust to range. He could kind of throw that safely, because the technique of throwing that kick, you know, Greg Jackson did a how-to video on how to throw that kick with John Jones. So, you know, when you're throwing that kick, your leg is going forward as your upper body from your torso waist up is leaning backwards. So he's more out of range while still hitting. Now, I don't know if he was out of Owens' range, because Owens is a long guy, almost as tall as John. But when when he would throw that was kind of where he was. And at the end of the second round, where he threw that jumping, spinning back kick to the head, that was Jones opening up more. Now, Jones took more risks at the end of the round, and Jones said it himself that the entire time he was kind of thinking, listen, I got to make it to the DC fight. And in a sense, that's being in the present, looking past your opponent in a way. Because when John usually fights, it's more like the just, the belt's on the line. The usual thing is at stake. But now it's his opportunity to get what he lost back. And being in there with a guy like Vince, you could get caught. So if he gets caught, and with all the thing that's been going on outside with the media and stuff like that, I doubt that'd be the reason, but that's how everybody and every journalist and every media outlet would report it as. And then it would be the fall. They would be calling it the fall of John Jones, his fall from greatness. So I'm sure that was on the forefront of his mind, especially with DC commentating. Like, why is DC there commentating, bro? You're supposed to be in the ring fighting. And even so, you're supposed to be healing up from an injury. You weren't limping. It can't be that bad of an injury if you're able to still cash a check. And I was so not a fan of him being there, talking about it, man, now you see, I wish I would have been in there. I think DC pulled out because he was scared of the John Jones 2.0. He was scared of him with all this strength, knowing that Jones took him down like so many times and DC only took him down once. Where he thought he had the advantage, he didn't. And now that the gap got greater, he was scouting Jones, man. And you're going to give him fucking front row seats to scout him? What if John Jones got stripped and then he was like, nah, I can't fight Rumble. And then at the DC Rumble fight, John Jones is sitting next to Goldie and Rogan commentating. What kind of shit would that be? For the UFC to even allow that, I'm not a fan of. That seems out of character for Dana White. To be able to be like, oh, you can't fight? Cool. Whatever. Hey, DC, why don't you come down and do some analysis work? Why don't you do some color commentary? It'll be interesting. You guys know my take on DC. When he says things that are honest, I give him respect. And when he doesn't, I call him out on his bullshit. But I think it's too far gone for me at this point. I don't respect DC. I don't like DC, as John Jones said. Because he makes it so easy to hate. I personally don't have a problem with whatever happened to John Jones outside of the ring. Shit happens. You're 28, you're a multimillionaire, and you're the baddest motherfucker on the planet. You smoke a little buds. You do a little blow. You drove home after a party, got into a little incident. Now, I've never had any drunk drive. I've never driven drunk. I've never did that or anything. But he messed up. But when you're under that pressure of shit, I could lose everything, you're not thinking clear. You're just thinking of how I can damage control. How can I just get out of the situation? And for all we know, John Jones fleeing the scene was damage control. For all we know. So I have no judgment or no opinion in that. And I'm not a perfect person, and I'm not gonna criticize that man at all for that, because he's not known. He's known to be a fighter. And for DC to be there, man, it pissed me off. Because why the fuck are you commentating? I wouldn't be too tight if he was at the Fox desk. But he was down there with Joe and Mike, commentating, running his mouth more than they are. And when John Jones threw that spinning back kick, and Owens got hit and kind of hit him with a little left hook on when they separated, DC's like, nice left hook from Owens. Didn't even acknowledge the kick. And it was just way too biased without being obviously biased. And he kept saying, man, I wish, you see, this is what I was saying, John Jones would be rusty. No, you bitch. He was training for your movement for 7 months. He was training to beat the shit out of you, and your pussy ass pulled out. Now, I wasn't going to touch on it after the fight, but when I see DC there in his cheap ass dress shirt, looking it frustrates me. It's frustrating. Because it's like, dude, you are the reason John Jones looks that way, because he's facing a last minute opponent because you pulled out. Now, I'm not one to criticize fighters to pull out, because the training they go through and what they put their body through is on a whole nother level. And quite frankly, most of us as fans, as spectators, a high level of admiration is the balls it takes, for me personally, is the balls it takes to get into the ring and fight. Now, I'm a boxer. I've gotten into street fights before. And I know firsthand, like, you know, boxing not too much, because my adrenaline usually doesn't get going in boxing. But when I got into street fights, my adrenaline was pumping like a motherfucker. And when that adrenaline is pumping, you don't feel shit. Like one of my street fights I got into, I got sucker punched. He just rocked me right off the bat. Not rocked me, he hit me, because I didn't feel shit, but my face got swollen up. So the fact that these people put themselves what they put themselves through, I have a respect for it. And they put their brains at risk, and that's something personally I'm not willing to do. Now, I'm not saying I wouldn't commit, and I wouldn't commit to training or anything. I would. If that was the path I choose, I would commit to training and work on my skills, but I don't have that confidence in myself that I wouldn't take damage, especially when you're facing high-level opponents. You got to respect what they're doing. So I don't have problems with people pulling out. I'm going a little long on that, but that's the point in case. But for you to be there commentating with a quote-unquote injury, talking shit when John Jones questions your injury on ESPN on First Take, you get mad at it, but you're all ready to show up as an analyst. Well, guess what, DC? Get ready to do that, because after John Jones beats your ass, that's going to be the only thing you're going to be fucking doing. Because DC has way too big of an ego to be second best. And DC's like fucking 36, bro. You're on the tail end of your career. You got into this shit late. Sorry. You did. That's your fault. No one else's. But it pissed me off, bro. And I can't respect DC no matter what. And I'm looking forward to, you know what? I was hoping it'd be a first round knockout when he fights DC. But I hope Jon Jones picks him apart for 23 minutes and then knocks him out. I don't want to see a submission. I want to see Cormier lose consciousness and hit the canvas for behaving the way you're behaving. Now, this wasn't supposed to be a DC rant. This is an analysis, but I'll talk about it later. So Jones almost finished OSP in the 4th round. 5th round is slow. Jones can't keep pushing the pace because he's more at risk to get caught. But for Ovens to just kind of sit there and do what he was doing, it was like, I'm not going to judge Ovens because Ovens stepped up to the plate on short notice to fight the greatest fighter. Arguably the greatest fighter. So he did good for that. You know, if the game plan is to force John to push the pace, I have no problem with that. But it wasn't, I was expecting, maybe if Jones got that takedown a minute or 45 seconds earlier, he would have finished Ovens in the 4th round. But the fact that they went the distance, it's like, all right, whatever. It wasn't what I was expecting, but he won. I'm happy. And we saw glimpses of Jones that we're used to. But he did a good job. For someone that's taken a short notice fight, didn't have time to study. Now I see the value in studying the opponent and what it contributes to Jon Jones' game plan and his performance. Because he was training for, imagine if you work every feint, every angle, every setup for one person, and then you gotta change it. And a lot of the fight is fucking reaction, man. You gotta react. You have under a second to react. So the training they do is to work movements for your opponent into your instincts. That's why they drill moves. So he was built for what he built himself up for. This camp was to fight DC, and you get a totally, you're fighting an orthodox 5'11" wrestler, and then you go to a 6'4" southpaw with knockout power. But my takeaway from it is Jon Jones did a good job. He did good. He performed. He dominated. The only disappointment is that I think the fans expected a finish and just more flashiness. Because Jones was flashy and in the fight, but it wasn't like the arsenal that he usually has. But I'm going to chop that up to the change in opponents. DC, you better... If DC pulls out a 200, I say fucking strip him and then just make the interim belt a legit belt. Because Jones already beat DC. He doesn't need to fucking beat DC again for the belt. But it pisses me off, man. And I'm sorry that I'm going on about DC when it's supposed to be a Jones analysis fight. But DC was a staple within this entire event and the build-up to the event and the event itself. You couldn't watch the fight without hearing DC's voice. And for DC to say, oh man, it was such a hard decision. Now that you see the regret in DC's voice. He expressed openly his regret for not taking the fight. That Jon Jones would not have been the Jon Jones that would have showed up to fight you. That was short notice. Jones fighting a totally opposite opponent of DC. But anyway, you know what? I'm done with that. I'm going on about it. Now, Demetrius Henry Cejudo. I did not expect DJ to dominate the clinch the way he did. Kudos to DJ, man. He is great. You know, he's almost like a mini John Jones, because he dominated what Cejudo did best, and that was quick. He put Henry Cejudo quick, and you know, for Cejudo to take that loss as gracefully as he did, I have a greater appreciation for Cejudo. See, what Henry Cejudo did, that was being humble in defeat. Henry Cejudo was humble in defeat. Because he straight up said, I thought I was going to dominate the clinch, and that's where Mighty Mouse dominated. For a gold medalist, Olympic caliber wrestler to admit that takes a lot. Respect to you, Henry. And I see Henry being one of the top guys in the division. I'd like to see Cejudo Benavidez next. But I mean, I don't see Cejudo making that big of a case for another title shot, but we have to see how he grows and develops. Now, I mean, there's not really much more to talk about that fight because it was quick. Now, Pettis Barboza. Not what I expected from Pettis. I don't know what's going on, but it kind of seemed like Pettis wasn't. All right, let me finish this thought. It didn't seem like Pettis was Showtime. It seemed like, I don't really know what's going on with Anthony, but I hope we see a turnaround. Maybe there's something going on behind the scenes, or maybe it's just like a psychological thing. But Pettis, that was a good fight, but it wasn't as competitive as I would have liked it to been. It was almost like Barboza dominated a lot of the rounds, like first and third. And Anthony wasn't really pulling the trigger, and Barboza was. Barboza did good, especially coming off of that loss to Ferguson. Barboza looked good, and he even kind of forced Anthony to go for the takedown like 2 times. And I'm like, man, for Pettis to go for a takedown, I think that was kind of telling in itself. I like Anthony Pettis. I hope he turns around, and next fight, I hope it's good. He's on a 3-fight losing streak now. Lost his title, lost to Alvarez, and it's hard because you could almost say that Dos Anjos and Alvarez was... Did I say he lost to Pettis? If I did, I meant to say he lost to Dos Anjos. But they kind of did similar ways of a blueprint of beating Pettis. But this, Pettis lost where Pettis shines. Now, I don't know if those 2 losses got into his head. I don't know what was going on. But that fight didn't live up to my expectations. It was a good fight, and it was a good fight for Barboza. Barboza's stock went up a lot. Now, Barboza and Ferguson might have to run that back for Barboza's sake, because I kind of feel like he earned that after this. All my respect to Barboza. I always liked Edson, but I have a greater respect for Edson after that performance. And, Robert Whittaker, he did a good job. That was probably I would say one of the duller fights, but it wasn't dull. You know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. It was a good fight, but on the card, it wasn't the fight that stood out. Now, Yair Rodriguez and Touche Fili, like, both of those guys weren't really on my radar before. I heard of Yair, but I never really watched him before. And, seeing their highlights, it was very impressive. That was a very entertaining fight. I thought that was kind of going to be almost how Pettis Barboza would be. But Yair Rodriguez pulled off that crazy fucking knockout. My word. And yes, I said my word, because that shit is like fucking sophisticated, the way he did that shit, man. And it was a competitive fight. Both of their striking was amazing. And I mean, Touche Fili lost, but Andre Fili lost, but I feel like he's definitely gonna. That fight kind of made the name for themselves, because he literally got caught, but he got caught by a motherfucking incredible kick. Incredible highlight reel kick. And for Yair Rodriguez to pull that on his caliber, man, I loved it. I loved it. And yeah, that's basically my take right now on 197. Apparently fucking McGregor's back on 200, but like I don't even know what's up with that. I'll do another video on that later. I'm gonna record the podcast today. I told you guys Monday I'm gonna be back to my steady uploads, and here I am. So, overall, Jones looked good, because Jones looked good. I don't care what anybody else says, because I'm taking in considering all the factors. Now, my opinion when I first saw the fight was like, shit, was that ring rust? But when I took into consideration the change in opponents and all that, and Jones doesn't seem like one to make excuses, like, at least in the cage. So I don't even think he doesn't make excuses, because he's been accountable for everything, even his shit outside the cage. So, man, good fight card. I would have liked to see Jones DC, because this kind of almost takes away from the allure of Jones in a little bit, because we're so used to such flashy dominance, and it was just dominant with sprinkles of flashy. And DC, Daniel Cormier, I do not like at all. There's nothing that he could do or say to make me like him. He could become John Jones' biggest fan, but as a fighter, you can't respect someone that pulls what he pulled. And no offense to any DC fans, but you guys have to be objective about it, man. And it just wasn't a good look to have him commentating. I heard rumors of it, but I kind of thought, nah, they wouldn't do that. Why the fuck would he be commentating? But he did. And this video is more, it should be called Masterminds Pissed Off at DC. But it is whatever it is, because it happened. There's nothing we could do about it. And at least now we know Jones could take a short notice fight and still dominate. Not in the extreme dominant fashion, but he still did dominate. And I'd like to see down the line, nowhere soon, not anytime soon, but I definitely would like to see Jones fight OSP again, when like OSP would have kind of worked his way up to the title if he did. But yeah, good fight card. I liked it. Props to Barboza, Yair, Mighty Mouse, John Jones. Props to OSP for surviving with a broken arm. Credit to you. You do get credit for that, because you were in there with the monster. And you already know it's Mastermind MMA.